Kia ora koutou and welcome to a Yarn Live in 2022. And I just had our guest on solo layout as I share them with them each before we begin. So you got to see front and center Professor Rosalind Archer, who we're going to be talking with today. And now you get to see me as well, which is probably not such a prize, but let's crack into today. So this is the first Yarn Live of 2022, and you know, it's probably a great story of connection and relationship because I've known Rosalind for quite a while and knew that she was going to this new role in Australia and just chatting away and still in MIQ and said, well, let's make that our first Yarn Live because we're going to hear about the new role, the shift to Australia, the new university and all the cool stuff that's going to be going on in the new role. And of course, going to hear about the Australian MIQ, which I guess is a bit of an interesting subject because MIQ's, for those that have been there, you know it, and I haven't been there. And those that haven't been there, you're probably curious like I am. And, you know, I guess in this case, we'll get to see it at some point. But on the 20th story overlooking Surfers Paradise might not be the worst MIQ I could think of. But with that, let me allow you to introduce yourself because as we do AFQY styles, we get to meet the person and then we'll get into the business conversation. So over to you.
Kia ora, Ryan. Good morning or good afternoon, depending where you are. I will just begin with a brief acknowledgement, an acknowledgement of country. So I begin by acknowledging the Kombumerri Narainwala people, the traditional custodians of the land in which I sit today. I pay respect to the elders past and present and extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people and to all staff and students at Griffith University. So yes, coming from New Zealand, that cultural context to opening my remarks is really important. And for anyone viewing from Australia, MIQ stands for Managed Isolation and Quarantine. So I am indeed in quarantine on day 10 of 14 days, perched at the 20th floor of one of the nice hotels at Surfers Paradise. The Australian police force on the bus, when they checked us in, assured our bus load that we had lucked out because we're one of the few hotels that has access to balconies and we have great ocean views. So that does definitely make the time a little bit easier. We're allowed out on the balcony as long as we wear our masks. But aside from that, I cannot leave this room. There is no exercise outdoors like the New Zealand. So I am stuck in the room for 14 days straight. It's quite an interesting challenge.
Do you have any do you have any challenge with the 14 days? And if you do, have you created any sort of coping mechanisms? Exercise there, eat there, sleep there.
I moved my furniture around today for fun. I had been just super busy kind of packing up and getting ready to leave New Zealand and then, you know, a quick Christmas down with my family in Taranaki. In fact, we had to move Christmas. We celebrated Christmas on Christmas Eve so we could drive back to Auckland on Christmas Day to be first in line for a PCR test for COVID on Boxing Day. Because you had to get the pre-departure test lined up. So yeah, everything was rush. So for the first couple of days here, literally I just kind of chilled out and decided it was totally okay to do nothing but watch Netflix and veg out if I wanted to. Yeah. But no, I've definitely got a bit of a routine here. I guess the craziest challenge I'll let you in on is I'm running a marathon, shall we say, over 14 days. I've decided, what the heck, let's run 42 point whatever kilometres in the room. 100 lengths of the room is about a kilometre. My room's about 10 metres long. Yeah. I'm an engineer, yes, I've measured it.
Yeah.
So, you know, getting off my butt and running 100 lengths or more of the room a couple of times a day will mount up to running a marathon. So it's just sort of mentally one way to just kind of chip away at anything that, you know, one step forward.
Yeah, absolutely. So now just remind me again, what's the distance you're trying to achieve?
A marathon is 42.4 kilometres.
And what are you up to at the moment?
I think I've got about 15 to go. So yeah, I've done at least 20.
So
25.
how many laps or back and
Oh,
forth?
so with the room being 10 meters long, that's over 4,000 laps of the room. But over 14 days.
Now there's something fun to put on hyperlapse camera.
Or really boring.
Yeah, possibly. Well, that's quite fascinating that they don't have. Is that for the same for? I don't know if you know, but is it the same for everywhere that there's no exercise yard? I mean, to be realistic, it actually sounds like the sensible thing. If you're putting people in lockdown and isolation for quarantine, why then let them out when it's an air transmissible virus? And hence, look at our Delta case. It supposedly came from the person in the courtyard breathing over the fence to the guy who caught it on the way through.
Exactly. So yeah, I get it. I've also got an online membership to my gym back at home. I mean, it's the greatest deal. Pay $50 a year to never go to the gym physically.
Well, they've got it on TV now. So they put Les Mills workouts on Sky, and I've recorded the button. So I've recorded all the series. The trick is I still haven't done an exercise session yet, but I am. If you use Strava, you can find me on Strava. I am doing my dog walks at the Taiperi Strand dog walk out Te Aotearoa Peninsula.
I know it.
Which gets up to about 6 kilometres a walk a day. So not too bad. Certainly not just sitting on the sofa watching Netflix, but I've done a bit of that over Christmas. So we've got through most of the good stuff. So shall we crack into the big discussion today, the new role? So could you give us a bit of an idea of the size, scope? Tell us about Griffith University. We're pretty accustomed to Auckland University, but tell us about Griffith and what the new role entails.
Sure. So Griffith is a relatively young university. It was founded in the early 70s, so it doesn't have the long history that a lot of universities do. But in many ways, that's interesting because it makes it perhaps more agile and not bound by that history. Has about the same number of students as the University of Auckland. And my new role is to be head of the School of Engineering and Built Environment. So it's a really diverse mix. It has several engineering disciplines, mechanical, civil, electrical, but it also brings in the built environment through architecture, urban planning, industrial design, and it has one of the largest aviation programs in Australia as well.
Aviation? Not alienation?
Aviation, as in flight.
Oh, aviation. Oh, crikey. Well, it's kind of in the space of aliens. It's interesting. Like, what is it? New Zealand was the 11th country in the world to have a rocket launch site. I don't know. I assume Australia does. But when I grew up as a kid, I never thought anyone from Dunedin or New Zealand would ever be involved in space. And now we've got space rockets, satellites, goodness knows what else, and quite a bit of a growing sort of thing here in New Zealand. So I imagine there's probably a little bit more happening over there in big old Oz.
Yeah. No, we have CubeSats being developed on campus and going into space, and collaborations with Gilmore Space. But yeah, the aviation program has a future pilots program with Qantas. Obviously, COVID has posed some challenges, but we are hearing that COVID will be restarting that. But there's also a lot of domestic aviation that's not as affected by COVID, and the discipline of aviation involves a whole lot more than that. Have people looking at aviation law, weather, airport operations, all sorts of stuff.
Absolutely. So what was the other thing I was just thinking? What about geothermal?
The geology here in Australia is a little different than New Zealand. You'll see a suspicious lack of volcanoes, and volcanoes are normally good for geothermal. Okay. But there is quite an interesting angle on that around oil and gas companies who are looking to transition their operations into cleaner forms of energy. So many oil and gas companies actually produce large amounts of really quite warm water, hot water, as a byproduct of the oil and gas production. So there is definitely scope to see that as a geothermal resource and to support those companies to transition.
Okay. And hey, I was thinking this before. I'm sort of going off tangent from geo, but and it's actually more related to our last question around STEM. But there's something you said around the aviation, and I was like, I'm just watching the Transformers series. For I think I've probably watched the Transformers series as much as I've watched the Star Wars series, and that's a lot. But I was just thinking, the movies like Transformers, like when young people come in, and I don't know if they get interviewed these days or what the process is like, but does anyone ever mention, like, I was inspired by Transformers, I want to build a transformer that, because there's actually, I saw it through LinkedIn, these wheels that have been designed, and they're like a mesh, and they'll roll over anything, take the shape of what's underneath them.
Okay.
And never, and they actually come from the technology that's used for the Mars rover, but they're now going to become tires that you put on your car. So yeah, it was sort of in that space of the ability to transform. But coming back to the question, do you sort of see that in some sort of part of the application form? What was your inspiration to become an engineer, or why do you want to study to become an engineer? Does it come up at all? I know it's a little bit
I'm sure we do. Like all the universities will be doing sort of market research on why young people want to become engineers, and in general, it's to make a difference in society. One of the sort of mega trends around why people want to become engineers these days, that we were noticing in Auckland at least, was the question of climate change. People really want to do things that will make a difference in terms of climate change. It's an issue that young people really, really care about. So a lot of interest in, how can I get involved in renewable energy, for example, or how can we design materials that are better for recycling and that sort of stuff.
Oh, so another this is from the World Economic Forum page, by the way, but they have created a material that takes the energy, converts the energy with sunlight from something. And I put a comment on there and said, yes, I've been talking avidly about one day there'll be a car that, as it drives through the air, it converts the pollution in the air into energy somehow. Don't know how, but someone will create it one day. And that's kind of like, you can probably tell I'm fixed on Star Wars and Transformers in my little world. But the reality is, if you put it into more pragmatic terms, it's people designing these wheels that can reform over things. It's the desire to create something that's going to use the pollution to drive the vehicles and create a new form of renewable energy. So coming back to you, though, the next question, which is, what sort of aspirations do you have for this role? Everyone going into a new role probably has some exciting ideas, thoughts, dreams, hopes. Have you share yours?
Yeah, well, I guess I'm still in many ways transitioning into the role. So I started work for Griffith on the 10th of December from my home office in New Zealand. I've now at least made it into Australia, but haven't made it to campus courtesy of quarantine. So I'm yet to actually really fully meet all my staff or to fully explore all the facilities. I did pop over here when the travel bubble was open in May for an interview. So met a few people then. Yeah. But really right now I'm still in a kind of listening and learning phase. But big picture, I think I really want to make the most of the diversity that the school has in terms of combining engineering and built environment and making sure that it is more than some of its parts, because I think to tackle some of the big challenges that the world faces right now, we need those kinds of collaborations that cross disciplines. So having multiple disciplines housed in this entity looks like a really great opportunity to build and grow those collaborations. But yeah, no, I'll be thinking both about culture and strategy very, very hard. Trying to make sure that everyone's the best they can be.
Absolutely. Well, hey, come to my other pet subject, digital twins, and of course, they span a whole range of areas, and I really like the point around embracing the diversity to drive collaboration to tackle these big challenges, right? So if we think about back in the old days, you could pretty much put everything and anything into silos, right? And as we've moved over, especially over the last 10 to 5 few years in COVID, it's accelerated the breaking down of silos and the creation of whatever term you want to put on it, whether it be agile or value streams or cross-functional teams is probably a good practical word for it. But yes, this is where you get all the different disciplines coming together and collaborating essentially, because one person who's a specialist in one area needs 4 to 5 people who are specialists in their 4 to 5 areas to actually solve the whole problem. So the advent of digital twins again goes back to space and NASA trying to plan the change of something. I think it was on the space station. So they simulated it with 3D imagery.
Exactly.
And now, just as that 3D built world was taking off that I was working in pre-COVID flipped digital twins over to the supply chain aspect, in terms of the famous toilet paper situation, which was never actually a problem, but just the fact everyone was buying toilet paper in case they ran out. But yes, the ability to see the digital twin as a data flow through the organization and understand it. So yeah, some pretty exciting stuff. Now, before I get down a rabbit hole, I'll come back to the questions. I think it's good to, while it's dangerous if I waffle, it's also good to add in, I guess, a bit of a layman point of view to, me being Lil Orion, you being Professor Archer.
No problem.
So coming back to MIQ, I think it'd be good to look at that because we did touch on it. And as noted before, curiosity of people that haven't been in it. Now you've got 20th floor views of Surfers Paradise, what everyone dreams of on their Surfers Paradise holiday. But you've got 4,000 laps of the room to go. What is I guess at this point the question is, what is the sort of observation or realization from the experience? Did anything magical pop into your brain? Was it an epiphany type thing where you're meditating on the 4,000 laps?
Probably no big epiphanies, but I guess I have used it as an opportunity for a bit of a spring clean, if you like. I went through my personal email account and unsubscribed to all sorts of email lists that just didn't matter to me, and kind of cleaned up my social media in terms of what I was following and what I wasn't, and tried to be more conscious about that, because all that stuff lets influences into your life, and it's like, hang on, if I don't really choose that. So I definitely went on a spring clean there, but I guess in a lot of ways it feels a lot like lockdown in Auckland. I mean, during lockdown in Auckland, we definitely were staying at home, and that whole process does kind of teach you what you need in a day, what recharges you. So just making sure that you get that. But yeah, I mean, it's also given me a lot of space. So I've been trying to make sure I've put in some time for learning of different forms, which can be quite energizing. Whether that's professional stuff, so work gives us a full subscription to LinkedIn Learning, or other personal interests.
So question, on your LinkedIn profile, is that a aerial shot of Griffith University?
Busted, it's not, it's Auckland.
just a reminder, might want to check
Thanks,
that one later.
Ryan.
That's right. No worries.
I'll find a spot of the surfers once I get out.
Well, one of the great things is that a brilliant engineer decided that they could enable you to change your head image on mobile probably about 6 months ago. So you can just take a photo, off the balcony and add it in after the session if you like. Keep things spring clean. So, hey, thinking back about New Zealand, though, just mentioned that that is an old image on your profile. Thinking about things like Engineering New Zealand. I think, if I'm not wrong, you were the third woman to be president over the year. So what happens with that role? Do they re-elect the role? Do you operate from Australia?
Yeah, no, it's not forcing a by-election. I am operating from Australia. I have 3 months of my term left, so through to the end of March. And yeah, when you think about it, I've actually chaired more board meetings online than I have in person, courtesy of Auckland's lockdown. So aside from having to get up a little earlier to chair a board meeting, not a lot changes.
Right, okay.
Engineering New Zealand went into COVID in really good shape. They were already an organisation that had embraced flexible work in full. So yeah, my physical location doesn't change a lot, and even a lot of our external engagement. So even, admittedly from New Zealand, but while working for Griffith, I represented Engineering New Zealand at Parliament, and went to a meeting in a minister's office on Zoom. And the New Zealand Parliament's embracing Zoom, so they were encouraging people to have ministerial appointments by Zoom, and so yeah,
Yep.
I will remain as president.
Cool. Well, that's really cool, and that'll be another first, being the first president to operate from another country. I assume there's going to be some form of equivalent in Australia. So are you planning to get involved in the Australian one? I assume that'd be part and parcel of life now for the next few years.
Yes, I confess I need to join Engineers Australia. And professionally, they will be part of life because they accredit at least the engineering programs that are part of the School of Engineering and Built Environment. So I will have a professional relationship with them that way. But yeah, for the near term, I won't be looking for any sort of governance roles in their organisation. I'll need to be fully focused on what I'm doing at Griffith.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Okay. And the other question I was going to actually ask, though, was, is there a great relationship between Engineering Australia and Engineering NZ? And perhaps is that one of the other positives that might come out of this journey you're on, is connecting the dots between the two?
Yeah, I know the senior management teams in both organisations do collaborate and benchmark quite often. At governance level, less so, but yeah, it could be something to come out of this.
Cool. Well, hey, on the home stretch with the last formal question. What's the female engineering community like in Australia? Obviously, something that's being worked on here extensively in New Zealand, probably globally, but now you're in a bit of a driving seat and opportunity. What's that situation look like, and what's your take on it at the moment?
So Griffith, at least engineering and built environment, is 23% female. So that's less than where we're at in New Zealand. But similar to where we're at in New Zealand, there is a real appetite for change and a commitment of resources to do that.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, Auckland has always done very, very well in that space. So hopefully there's some lessons learned that we can bring across the Tasman.
Well, what's Auckland at as a bit of a comparison? Is it 25% or is it 70%?
For engineering, we're hovering at around 27, 28.
Okay. So
we're trying to smash through that, but in many ways, COVID did not help there. No,
it makes it a little bit harder. But the good thing is that 23, 27, it's not 23, 47 or something like that.
No, it's not worlds apart.
Yeah, I know.
But the other group that I'm quite interested in retention and success of is Indigenous Australians. So I confess I was really disappointed when I got a data pack that showed that the student body here is only 1.6% First Nations peoples. But for perspective, the Australian population is 3.3%. But that says we're still only, halfway towards where we need to be if we want population parity.
Yeah. No, that's when we were talking about this before coming on screen, and having sat through a number of Australian sports games, especially against New Zealand, and welcome to country that now happens, and of course the government apology. I think was it 2000 and not was it 2019 or 2000? Sorry, not being Australian, it's not off the top of my head.
But
I know
it's very
there
recent.
was a very major apology, which is a great shift and change from what was to what can be. So yeah, it'd be really interesting to see the growth and development of that area and the positive changes. I guess the two stories between New Zealand and Australia on that front, while the details similar but different, the situation's conceptually the same. So yeah, what's the sort of general feel like? What's the situation? What am I trying to say? What is the opportunity like? Because how do you get students to university full stop? And in Australia, like in New Zealand, it's quite easy to travel from, say, Auckland to Otago University or Otago to Auckland University. But Australia is a much bigger place. I've got no idea where they do student loans or student support or anything like that. What are all the pieces in place to facilitate someone getting to university, removing those barriers? What's that situation like?
Yeah, I mean, there are student loans in a similar way to New Zealand, so they're sort of connected to the tax system. After you graduate, you pay them back through your taxes. There's a lot of targeted scholarships, but yeah, I mean, the geography is different. Some Indigenous Australians are living in remote communities that are just going to be geographically harder to connect with. But I think the real key for any underrepresented community for me is about relationship and role models, and really just being able to see yourself taking a place in the institution. So we've got to do everything we can to make sure that those students coming through have relatable role models.
Awesome. Sounds like a pretty solid start to a plan there. So we're just wrapping up in the last few minutes. I guess it's an opportunity to, in theory, say goodbye to some colleagues in New Zealand. Although, of course, it's not like we can't get in touch with you, but also say hello to some new colleagues and friends in Australia. So, closing remarks. What would you like to share with the people that are listening?
Well, I mean, first of all, given the timing where we are in January, I hope many of my colleagues in New Zealand and in Australia, for that matter, are still on the beach, have put their phones down, and are actually disconnecting from being online, because we've all spent a lot of extra time online in the last couple of years. And, at least here in Australia, for those of you watching the news in New Zealand, the Omicron outbreak is getting pretty lively. So we're in for an interesting few weeks here. We're strongly encouraged to work from home at the moment, but yeah, it's not goodbye to New Zealand at all. I definitely want to stay to stay connected, and really to make the most of those connections. Introducing New Zealand colleagues to Australian counterparts where there's a mutually valuable relationship, or to bring lessons learned from New Zealand around our journey with Māori recruitment and retention and success in engineering. Bring those lessons with me to Australia. So no, it's not goodbye, but yeah, I'm definitely looking forward to the point where the bubble comes back and travel does get a little bit easier. Right now, my husband is still in New Zealand. He's got some contract work for an organisation that he's loving working for. I won't say who.
Are you allowed to? No, okay, no, that's fair enough.
I won't go there in public. But yeah, hubby has a temporary job he loves at the moment, so he's
pretty cool gig. We'll put it that way.
He's got a cool gig, but in return, he gets to deal with all the details of packing up the house.
I've managed to escape that twice personally, so Yeah,
And
well done you. Well done
I
you.
get to, once I get out of quarantine, I get to go out and find us initially a rental property and buy a car, and he's just going to have to, accept it.
Love with it. Yeah. And what was the thing? Oh, now talking about making connections, I've got 2 connections that I'll make with. Now, I'll say that I believe they're both First Nation. They could be Torres Strait Island people, but both activists. Was activist the right word? Very, very, very. It's all a new world, right? So I'm not quite sure, but the intent and what I'm trying to say is 2 people that are really positively active about doing some really good stuff in that space. So I'll connect you through LinkedIn as usual. See if it's of any use. Obviously connection is always good for the sake of for the value of a connection, but it might also have some real value for what you're trying to achieve with the embracing First Nation Torres
Strait Islanders,
Not
yeah.
Strait Island.
Yes. Feel free to make any introductions.
Yeah. Okay. Well, with that, we will say ka kite anō. And of course, next time we do a call, you'll have to be able to say goodbye in First Nation language. Now, I might be putting you on the spot here, but is the correct term to use First Nation rather than Aborigine?
I believe so.
Thank you.
I still have a lot to learn though.
Yes. So for the next call in 6 months, 12 months, to hear about the update of what's been happening, you can say goodbye in First Nation language. How's that? That's a challenge.
We'll see what I can do.
All righty, mate. Well, thank you very much and good luck and congratulations on what looks like an amazing role. And the last thing I'll drop in there is I used to live at 51 Sheriff Street in Brisbane, which is a stone's throw from Suncorp Stadium, the city, and Latrobe Terrace. So I'll probably be back over when the borders open myself, because most of my family that used to live in Christchurch now lives in Brisbane. So I'll be over that way to come and catch up with some old mates from when I used to live there and family, and might poke my head into Griffith and check it out. So you take care, cool. And hopefully you get your 4,000 paces or meters on your marathon of the room, and sure. Good luck with the new challenge and new role.
Okay, cool. Thanks, Ryan. See you.
Yes, thank you.
Bye.